Adepticons came and gone this year, and with it, Golden Demon 2024. If you were lucky enough to attend, well, I'm very jealous. But for the rest of us, we got to play out the events, either online or in retrospect via community articles and perhaps videos like this. This week, I want to talk about what's going on in the painting community, painting competitions specifically, and what should and maybe shouldn't be allowed. I'm Wayne, how are you doing? As I said, Golden Demon 2024 has happened already. A few weeks ago at Adepticon, and there was a lot of controversy. Let's not say that there wasn't. Clearly there was. If you're even remotely interested in the hobby, there's a very real chance you've come across a lot of what's happened there, people's views and opinions on it. And well, I wanted to add my voice to that conversation as it's something I'm very interested in, and I think it's worth discussing as a community as a whole without being overly critical. Now, with that said, what I don't want to do is diminish anybody's work that entered Golden Demon. Once again, the level has just become astronomical. I mean, these people are so good. There is no losers. If you entered into Golden Demon, then kudos to you, because the competition is so fierce. It is absolutely insane. And nothing that I've got to say about what I think or feel would make the competition better should be taken with anything more than a pinch of salt. These are just ideas that I'm hopefully going to try and address some of the criticisms that have come out of Golden Demon 2024. So, with that said, let's jump over to the browser, have a look at some of the stuff that's happened, and in the first instance, let's talk about generative AI. Now, that is something that is huge at the moment. Everybody is got a bugbear about using AI for literally pretty much everything at this point, and it's going to come a point where I guess people are going to be saying, well, the entire thing was painted with AI. Now, that's taking it a little bit far, but let's look at what's going on. So, the winner of Golden Demon, Neil Hollis. Now, this is a fantastic entry. There is no way about it. I mean, this thing is absolutely perfect. You can analyze this all day long. There is no doubt Neil is a absolute deserving winner of not only Golden Demon, but this guy is next level. But the controversy comes around this background image. Now, Neil's not shied away from saying that he's used AI to generate this background. That's absolutely fine. So that's transparent from the get-go. And also, let's just state that there are no rules at the moment that say you're not allowed to use AI. So, that being said, what do we think? Now, this background, it does fit in very, very well, obviously, with the overall piece. The composition works with it, and it does have it does add a level of depth to that gives it even more prominence in the frame. I suppose it comes down to, from my perspective at least, the rules of the competition. Now, is it a painting competition, or is it an overall competition of composition, sculpting, all of that hobby space encapsulated into one? For my 2 pence on this, it's a painting competition. Golden Demon always has been a painting competition, and with that in mind, I do think this year's categories and lack of solid rule conveyance to the participants might be somewhat to blame here. Now, do I think that Neil wouldn't have won if he didn't have this AI background? You know what? I don't know. It definitely does add to the piece, and obviously there was work and effort put into that in terms of the prompting that you must have had to use to generate it. And then I'm guessing some supplementary editing to make sure that the tones matched, the colours matched everything, so it worked as a holistic composition piece. But that said, it is a grey area for me on this one, I'm afraid. Now, I'm all for giving backgrounds to miniatures, especially competition pieces. But again, I think this needs clarifying from Games Workshop. When we look at some of the other pieces, even the single miniature, I mean, is it a single miniature? What is a miniature at that point? Because these are all of them, for that intent and purposes, are all on dioramic bases. If we're looking purely, and this is just subjective on my part, if we are looking purely at the painting ability of a participant, then I would say what perhaps needs to happen is we need to establish a baseline of what we expect. So let's remove all the dioramic bases from that and have the model in isolation on either a pedestal base or a standard base size, whatever the model is, whatever category it is. Now, I do think there is some ambiguity there as well. A lot of people wouldn't like that, but I do think it removes an area of influence out of that. So you're removing people's ability to construct a sympathetic base. If we are looking at this as purely a painting composition, I suppose there is arguments that that would be part of the composition of the piece overall, but let's look at painting a miniature just in that respect, and a figure or a vehicle or an animal, just that single thing in isolation. And perhaps then that would have the knock-on effect of making the judging a little bit faster, because you've got less to consider. You're actually just looking at the technical ability, the artistic intent of the artist that painted the piece. I think that would help, and then that completely removes this issue of backgrounds in the future being AI generated. I do think it's been a little bit of a hoo-ha around something that wasn't really clarified in the rules, so he's not actually broken any rules. And by that, wholly stand by Neil being the single miniature winner. Absolutely, go for it. You've smashed it, dude. Out the park, cracking up. Right, so with that being said then, why don't we take it one step further? Now, removing the background from a miniature like we've already established, that would be a great first step, but we could take it a little bit further, because then you've got the whole problem of, are we allowing 3D printed bits and pieces to be put on the model? Now, before we get into that, if you're liking this style of content, I'm really enjoying talking about this side of things, so I'm not going to do these each and every video, but if you are enjoying it, leave me a comment down below, let me know, so I can make some more content like this in future. If you're not already, give me a sub, it'd be much appreciated. I do enjoy talking about the hobby content and doing the hobby. This is all part of it for me, so yeah, give me a follow. Anyway, now I've got that one out of the way, let's talk more about the structure of painting competitions in general, specifically Games Workshop, I suppose. Let's talk about Games Workshop specific painting competitions and the general rules that perhaps should apply as a through line there. So Golden Demon being a great example and the best known one. Remove the backgrounds, remove the dioramic bases, and then I would suggest taking it one step further. So for the absolute top tier painting competitions where you are looking at utter technical ability, remove any ambiguity from that and make the judging simpler based off of technique and intent, and have a standardized model for each of the individual categories. So as an example, Space Marines, let's just have a standard interceptor. Nothing fancy, nothing that's going to be expensive, so people can either buy the model or you enter, and as part of your entry fee to Golden Demon, you get sent the standard model that will be used for that year's entry. That then allows GW to control the model, the base size, how it will be presented to them, and then thusly allows the judges to concentrate solely on if it is well painted, how it's painted. There's still a huge scope for creative freedom inside of that, because you can paint it however you want to paint it. You don't have to paint it a specific chapter, and that's why I think this is a really good idea. Perhaps then you want to paint an orc or something like that. Well, that would be an issue. Absolutely, I grant you that. However, I do also think that Games Workshop could either cycle those models, or then you have categories for it with an overall winner or you have the overall winner being in an open category, so you can allow people that ultimate creative freedom, but you have controllable categories that do have some standardization across the board. And you could do the same thing with fantasy. A Stormcast, again as an example, it's very boring, but it's cheap for Games Workshop to give these models out. They already do them with Models of the Month or Models of the Week, whatever it's called, in stores. And it's something that everybody is familiar with. There's an intentful baseline across the board by using a Space Marine or a Stormcast, or even an Orc. There is still a consistent level of what is expected and what that output might be like. So from people observing those miniatures like myself, we do have something to already base that off of, rather than coming into it and being like, wow, this is too much. And it does let you look then specifically at perhaps what a painting competition is about, which is the actual painting, not the composition of the scene, the modelling that's gone on around it to make that specific miniature more prominent in the scene. You are literally surgical focus on the painting style, technique, execution, which for me is what Golden Demon is. Now, I'm not saying at all that we shouldn't have different kind of categories that allow basically as it is, but by removing that, you're then giving anybody that wants to participate much more scope to concentrate on what it is that they're wanting to achieve. Is there an argument that you're going to dilute the competition somewhat, or that you're going to make judging more difficult because you've got perhaps more entries in specific categories, and even more categories? Well, I think that's worth talking about as well, because the categorization of Golden Demon this year is very strange to me. I'm sure it makes sense to Games Workshop, and I'm sure there is a finite resource in terms of judging. However, the categorization seems somewhat broad, even though they've just grouped too much together in those categories, and a lot of the entries would potentially span multiple categories from how they've got it set up. So this one, for example, Vashtor, this is beautiful as well. Not only is this model fantastic anyway, but how he's used, I'm assuming this is Bellacor's base. I think it's Bellacor's base. And posed it. I mean, this is just great, and this goes to show what can be achieved in these competitions. However, large miniature or vehicle is the category this was entered in. So you're putting. I mean, what's a large miniature at that point? Is it 28mm? Is it 32mm? Is it 57mm? All of these different choices that you've got, and then you've got that against a vehicle. And I don't know about you guys. I'd be really interested to hear what you've got to say about this. But when I'm painting a vehicle, it is a completely separate approach to what I would use to paint something perhaps like Vashtor. The techniques, the execution, the level of finish, they're both very, very, very different. And I think it makes it hard for the judges to judge something that is, if we look at it in terms of 40k perhaps, a tank, which is a lot of flat, angular surfaces that require a lot of pristine technical execution to really sell at this level, and that's kind of what we see against something that's more organic, perhaps like this Vashtor piece, where yes, there's that juxtaposition between the mechanical and the organic, so you've got those two things in there, but you're very, very different in terms of overall technique that you would use. And I appreciate there is some overlap, and a lot of people perhaps would paint them very, very similar in terms of techniques that they would use. However, I think from a judging perspective, it makes it very, very hard to compare those two things, to say one is objectively better than the other. And I use objective there, where a lot of this is obviously going to be subjective. And again, I think this leans back to what I was saying about having a standardized model, a standardized approach that then lets you be more objective in a space that is fundamentally subjective to some degree, and give a baseline for that painting competition aspect of it overall, where things like this perhaps could be subcategorized down into more discrete categories that give that creative freedom. And then, of course, there would be the overall winner for the Slayer Sword, which could be anything from any of the categories. And of course, this year we had the fantastic one that I think everybody's seen by this point. Is it Kado Ezekiel or Ezekiel, the Hollow King from Warhammer Fantasy? Now this is mind blowing. This is wild, bananas, completely nuts level of brilliance here. I mean, the technical execution is beyond reproach, and this is a perfect example of everything that I've just tried to encapsulate. Perhaps not so eloquently, but this is so well done on so many levels. But I don't feel it's as well painted as some of the other entries. But overall, as a piece, there is no denying that this deserved it because it is brilliant. But it goes to show then that it's not just a painting competition. This guy, as I can't remember his name, Alexandros, mate, you're at your next level. But what's going on is the piece is very well painted. I'm not denying that, but I don't think it's quite as good as some of the other miniatures that have been entered. But what is better about this is the actual overall piece, the modelling on it, how he's actually inverted everything. So this he's not just got two copies of the top and then flipped it over to the bottom. He's going to have either resculpted, 3D scanned, and then inverted, and then printed out these other elements because these are actual proper mirror images of one another. So he's not just like rotated them on, otherwise like the sword would be the wrong way around, and the grass would be the other way around and such, and oh man, this is brilliant. But it's not I'm not judging it on its painting criteria. I'm not just looking at the technical execution. And yes, I know I'm looking at a photograph that somebody's put online. This compression and seeing it in person would be totally different. But I don't have that luxury. I wasn't at Golden Demon, and I'm not one of the judges, obviously. But this doesn't feel like a painting piece to me. This feels like a miniature. And if it was best miniature, that would be something different. Whereas some of the other stuff where it's much simpler, like this J&R, it's on a fairly simple base, but it kind of gives you then the scope to view it on its painting merit rather than its technical ability to create something as beautiful as this piece that Alexandros has put together. So I think to wrap everything up, it'd be great if Games Workshop really did start to look at how they categorize competitions, how things were done in a much more structured approach to stop this sort of this conversation around competition and whether certain things should or shouldn't be allowed. Standardizing the presentation, removing some of the backdrop elements from it, and concentrating purely on technical execution, if that's what it is that Golden Demon actually is. Either that, or you start to rebrand Golden Demon into something more than a miniature competition, and that's absolutely fine as well. I would love Games Workshop to just clarify that a little bit, but I do think a lot of the negativity, again, in the community has been a little bit blown out. It doesn't need to be so controversial. People aren't lying, to my understanding, aren't lying and saying they created backdrops when they didn't. And certainly, to my understanding, nobody's getting AI to paint their entries yet. So let's just all calm down a little bit. Enjoy the amazing miniatures that have been put out there by some absolutely fantastic next level artists. And let's just enjoy the hobby, guys. That's all we can do. That's what we're all here for at the end of the day. If you've got some input on this, I would love to have the conversation with you down in the comments, so do hit me up. If you're not already, do subscribe, and the next video is going to be the end of the Tyranid Kill team. So yeah, join me for that. I hope you enjoyed this one, and I'll catch you in the next one. See ya!